Good evening. We are back to the study of the Spirit's book. We are on book 2. In the chapter that talks about the return to the corporeal body, and we are discussing mental impairment and insanity. We started last week, and we are going to continue today. We stopped on question 374, so we are going to start today on question 375. And I'll ask Philip to read for us, please.
375. When a person is insane, what is the state of that individual's spirit? When a spirit is free, it receives impressions directly and directly exerts its action on matter as well. When a spirit incarnates, it is in an entirely different condition and is required to act only through the designated organs. If some or all of these organs are impaired, its actions or impressions concerning those organs are interrupted. Individuals beset by such impairments become blind if they lose their eyes, deaf if they lose their ears, and so on. Imagine now that the organ responsible for manifestations of intelligence and will is partially or entirely impaired, and you will easily understand that the use of such an incomplete or distorted organ will provoke a functional distress that the spirit is fully conscious of but unable to control. Subsection A. Then it is always the body, not the spirit, that is dysfunctional. Yes, but remember that just as the spirit acts upon matter, matter in turn reacts upon the spirit, at least to a certain extent. Due to the altered state of its receptor organs, the spirit may temporarily receive various impressions. When the insanity continues for long periods of time, the repetition of the same acts may exercise a strong influence on the spirit. It only ends with its complete separation from all material impressions. I can't see the rest.
Okay, that's the end of it. Okay, so we discussed last week that the imperfections of the physical body prevent the spirit to manifest itself. And that's what they are talking about here. So the spirit, it's not mentally impaired, is not blind, is not deaf. The spirit is using an instrument that doesn't allow it to fully express itself. Again, I gave the example of a great pianist using a child's piano. He or she won't be able to play to the fullest of their abilities. They are limited by the instrument that they are playing with. So the physical body is the same thing. The fact that the physical body is unable to fully express what the spirit wants to express is what makes the inability of the spirit to express itself. So again, the question from Kardec on part A, then it's always the body and not the spirit that is dysfunctional. In terms of expressing itself, yes. So the spirit acts upon matter, but also the spirit is affected by the physical body it's using. So in the sense that the impressions that the spirit receives through the physical body carries on to the perispirit, and many times when the spirit discarnates, when the person discarnates, it carries the impressions all to the spiritual world, and for a certain period of time, depending on each spirit, it will carry these imperfections, like they say here. The repetition of the same acts may exercise a strong influence on a spirit, meaning if the spirit spend their whole life unable to properly communicate, it can take some time until it fully detaches from, fully separates from the physical body mentally, not physically, mentally, here is the case, to be able to fully express it. Okay, so why are we saying that? Because sometimes when we read some of these books, especially by André Luiz, and sometimes when we have these spirits in mediumship meetings that manifest all the physical feelings that they are feeling from a physical body they no longer possess, it's exactly that. It's the impressions they are carrying back, or they carried back to the spiritual world, that may take some time for them to eliminate. So a spirit, again, here we're talking about mental impairment. If a spirit spend their whole life, physical life, with mental impairment, the inability of the spirit to fully express itself will cause the spirit, when it fully returns to the spiritual world, to take some time to readjust to its former fully ability to express itself. Okay, I hope it's clear. This, it's not very sometimes not very easy to fully comprehend, but that's the idea here, right? Remember, it's always the physical body that has the limitations. The spirit, what limitations the spirit have? The limitations imposed by their own level of evolution. If a spirit has moral imperfections, it's the spirit that has the moral imperfections. If the spirit doesn't have intellectual development according to what we expect, the spirit manifests its inability to fully express its intellectual abilities because it doesn't have. So the spirit has its limitation, yes, but the physical body imposed may impose more limitations on a spirit when it returns to the spiritual world. Okay, I hope that was clear. Any questions here, comments?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that the spirit discarnate, living the spiritual world for many, many years, so it's no longer receiving the impression of the physical body that was left behind, may present what we may interpret as insanity, but that derives from the moral delinquency of that spirit. And I was thinking, especially like in cases like the grandfather of André Luiz, when he's presented the book, carrying mud, carrying stones, and showing it to his grandson, say, "My gold, my jewels, my treasure." That to us, we'd qualify that as insanity. This guy is crazy. He's carrying mud and thinking it's gold. But that is a moral delinquency that is expressing what we would see as craziness there. The question that I would have, I don't know if we have the answer, is let's assume that it is a spirit incarnate with a, what do you call a normal physical body and normal brain, would that spirit still shows that moral delinquency? My suggestion would be no, right? That upon incarnating, upon receiving a healthy brain, when he sees a stone, we recognize it as a stone, not as gold or as a treasure.
Yes, I agree with you, but the attraction to the riches that gold brings will probably be present in that spirit that will have to be tempted again, so in order to overcome this imperfection, right?
Yes, absolutely. Which would be, in our standards today, a pretty normal person, by the way.
Yes. Yeah. And I was, even when I start talking, I even thinking more extreme cases, right? Cases of lycanthropy, the avoids.
Exactly. I was thinking that too.
Yeah, this can be considered uh, abnormal states of mind and spirits that are in the spiritual world, right? So when we talk about in mental impairment, we need to extend. Of course, we're talking about incarnated spirits, but yes, we have to think about the spiritual world also, and spirits that are immersed in their own guilty conscience. And actually, we just study right in the book, in the first chapter of the book, Action and Reaction, the lower zones, right? We discussed a lot of these spirits that end up in these places that are committed to practice evil or have pleasure in practicing evil, that end up in these places that so-called infernal zones, right, in the spiritual world, which are even worse than the lower zones. So if you miss the study, you can catch on the recording, or you can read the first chapter of Action and Reaction. Really worth. Okay. All right. Next one.
376. Why does insanity sometimes lead to suicide? The spirit suffers from its restriction and inability to manifest itself freely. It seeks death as a means of breaking these chains.
I think that is an interesting question, right? Because when we talk about suicide, we always talk about the consequences of suicide according to Spiritism, right? The difficulties that the suicides face back in the spiritual world. But there are gradations of suicide according to their own understanding and responsibility. And when someone that is in a level of insanity that doesn't really is not able to judge for oneself what he's doing and commit suicide, of course there is always consequences, but there'll be different consequences. And the concept here that the spirits bring to us is someone trying to escape from a prison, right? You are restricted and in a prison and unable to express yourself, you try to escape from prison. And the suicide can be the spirit, a manifestation of the spirit, a desperation of the spirit that is restricted by a physical body that it is that prevents it to manifest. Again, I'm not saying that this is acceptable in the sense of it doesn't lead to any consequence. It does. But the consequences of someone that commits suicide by means of insanity compared to someone that commits suicide by means of planning and knowing exactly what they are doing is very different. Okay. All right.
377.
Yes, please.
Is the imbalance that is the underlying cause of an insane person's suffering carried over from the physical life to the spirit world. The spirit may continue to feel it after death until it is completely freed from matter. This is similar to how one feels drowsy when waking from a very deep sleep.
Yeah, read the last one because it's basically the same.
How can the brain alteration act on the spirit after death? It is a memory that weighs heavily on a spirit. The spirit is not aware of all that took place due to the insanity and needs a certain amount of time to recover. This is why its agitation after death is always proportionate to the length of time that it suffered in its physical life. When a spirit is free from the body, it still feels the impression of the bonds that tied it to its physical life for a period of time.
Yeah, so it's more or less what we discussed, right? The underlying cause of an insane person suffering carries from the physical life into the spiritual world. It does, and it takes some time for the spirit to free itself from matter. And again, the reasons behind the spirit being in that state during the physical existence, which can be an atonement or can be a trial, also plays a role in the time the spirit is going to take to recover and become fully aware of itself back in the spiritual world. So in the same way that sometimes those that die from prolonged disease go back to the spiritual world still feeling the effects, and they ask here in our mediumship meetings, you know, what type, why did you move me to a different hospital? What I'm doing here? You know, I'm tired of suffering, and because it carries the diseases, carries the feelings, carry back to the spiritual world, and it takes some time, of course. In the case of a sickness, as a disease, it's easier for the spirit to recover. It's only a matter of the spirit understanding, in most of the cases, understanding that is back in the spiritual world, is being treated and will recover. We saw this with André Luiz in the book Nosso Lar. In the beginning of Nosso Lar, he stayed in the hospital a little bit there, recovering when he was taken to Nosso Lar. In the alterations of the brain that causes the spirit not to fully function intellectually in the physical life, it can be a little bit more difficult to recover, because you can reason with a spirit that have died from a disease and is back in the spiritual world. You can talk and make sense out of it easier than with a spirit that has spent their whole physical life with mental impairment, because it carries the mental impairment. It's more difficult to have a discussion. So normally it would be put to sleep for some time. You will be receive different sorts of treatment in the spiritual world, so we can recover to the so-called normal state. But again, each case is a case, and like Elmo presented, there are cases that the spirit will go back to the spiritual world and continue acting with imbalances because of their own understanding of things and own beliefs, and it can take shorter or longer time to recover. Depends also on how the guilty feelings of the spirits and other issues. And again, each discarnation, like each reincarnation, is unique in its whole process. Okay? Yes, Paco.
Let me see if I understood this correctly. Matter exerts an impression on the spirit. And that impression could become an impairment in the spirit world, and that's where it's going to be resolved eventually. But
Yes.
now, my question is, will it be resolved not on that going back on the return, but it could be resolved through different incarnations?
Yes, both. It could be resolved in the spiritual world, or a new reincarnation will be necessary for the spirit to fully overcome
Or
that.
become evolve in that rectifying of whatever.
Yes,
Okay.
both depending on the case. So
On the impression itself, also on the in particular case on the impression itself. Okay.
So in the book Action and Reaction that we just studied this Sunday, they are in a transitory house of assistance, right, called Mansion of Peace. And when the director of the house is explaining to André Luiz and Hilario what they are doing there, he talks about people that go there. Again, people that are taken to those places are spirits that are prepared to be helped, that accept the help and assistance. And they say, and he says, some spirits go from here to more elevated spiritual places, or they go from here to a new reincarnation, depending on their necessity. So that's exactly this type of spirit that has mental impairment can be taken to a place like that, spend some time there, being treated, being assisted, and from there, if they cannot fully recover in the spiritual world, they may be taken to a new reincarnation.
Okay.
Right, El?
Yeah, I think it's also a matter even of identity, right? It's how we see and identify ourselves. As simple as wake up in the spiritual world one day and look for our glasses, because we have vision problems. We identify ourselves as glass user, people who has visual deficiency, you need glasses. Wake up in the spiritual world, the first thing I do is my glasses. Hopefully somebody will explain, no, you don't need that anymore. That problem is stood behind with the physical body. Okay, now some people will struggle with that transition. And the self-identity could be even deeper. Someone who could be taught the entire life that it's a mentally challenged individual and accept an identity of a mentally challenged individual, they struggle to get out of identity and see himself as I'm cured because I no longer have a deficient brain.
Okay. Yes, Danny.
But it's in some cases that this kind of incarnation is to help the spirit to speed up whatever issue is going through in terms of the things, or the things that the spirit did before, or being guilty of the bad things did before. So being impaired might help in that way, but also help the speed in which the spirit, instead of recovering through, let's say, 3 incarnations, going through one is more complicated, but it helps out. So that is not in all cases, that it depends, or it is in most of the cases like this.
It depends, right? Because yes, many cases of mental impairment is a resource to benefit the spirit from repeating and insisting and aggravating the mistakes, that the tendencies that it has, right? So a life of restriction would allow the spirit to recover better, to learn from it, right? The restrictions will help the spirit learn. like we put, individuals that are a danger to society, we put in prisons that theoretically would serve as a lesson for the spirit, for the person to, to reflect, to evolve, to amend, to correct their mistakes. So the prison of the physical body can be that, right? The inability to express itself. Maybe the spirit will learn patience, will learn resignation, will learn, but sometimes, if it's a serious case of serious consequences, the one incarnation of a mental impairment has to be followed by an almost immediate one that they are back to normal, in the sense of can live in the physical world. So there is an opportunity for them to make the reparations and evolvement that they need, right? So and again, each case is a case, right? It depends on how much the spirit progresses also on during the incarnation, right? So the necessity, it's not never going to be, the spiritual guides are never going to say, oh, you are going to need 2 incarnations, one mental impaired and then another one. Depends on how you deal with your incarnation and you are mentally impaired, the spirit, because again, the spirit is, the physical body is mentally impaired, but the spirit is not 100% chained to the physical body. During the sleep, the spirit has interactions with the spiritual world, and how does the spirit interacts with the spiritual world during that time? Is it an opportunity? Is learning something from it, right? So each case is a case, of course, and but some cases are, of course, much more serious than others. But there are cases where they come on as a trial, right? So they come to have the experience, to learn something from the experience, and also sometimes to help those around them to learn to exercise their patience. It's not the spirit itself. It's more rare, but it can be also. So we can never judge someone that has mental impairment by saying, oh, it's a karma. It may not be, right? And we can look at how they react with the world, right? And again, we need to, medicine is evolving, the diagnosis of the cases are evolving also. So, there are different spectrums that are diagnosed today that in the past were not spectrum, right? So you say someone is in the spectrum nowadays, that 20 years ago, you wouldn't say it's in a spectrum. So you just say that, oh, that person is different, right? The person is original, like they used to say, right? And if you analyze today, they are in a spectrum. So what they can learn from it also. So everything is taken into consideration.
So I have a question, a follow-up question about the progress, right, during the incarnation. I don't know if you have the answer or an idea for the answer. With technology, iPhone, iPad, it became easier for the people who are in charge of those people, because they are not able to pay their bills, to get a job, or sometimes there are several levels of functioning, right? So in the more extreme cases of cognitive functioning, everything, emotional, everything. So it's the video games or the YouTube videos, whatever they're doing, it suits them, or it keeps their focus into there. So the relationships are put to rest for the moment, right? So the other day, a teacher at my school specialized in special needs was saying the kids, they play video game. It's satisfying, it's challenging, it's something that they can resolve by themselves. The YouTube videos, whatever they do. But when they turn off the technology, they have to deal with the real world and follow rules and be with other students in the classroom and respect the teacher in their own within their limitations, but they have to behave accordingly or as a student in the classroom. She said that it causes a tremendous anxiety because it's not what they are doing in the video game, or it's not so satisfying and easy as the movie plots they watch. So I don't believe that in the spiritual world there is not technology. It must be, because otherwise, right? So my question is, like, could be technology really helping maybe the parents around it, the family around it, to help that soothing period, but at the same time, when they come off, it's a bomb about to explode in some cases. So I don't know. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, technology is here to help us, right? And help us in all senses. Now, the use of technology and how to adequate the use of technology to the needs of different individuals, and I'm not only talking about special needs, but also regular children, right? Is something that we are still not fully prepared to deal with, because everything is new, right? So parents children have access to technology that their parents didn't have, and their grandparents even less. So they don't know how to exactly how to deal with it, and we are still learning as we evolve. So I'm sure the technology in the spiritual world is much more efficient, because we are a bad copy of the spiritual world, right? But I know that the fact that technology is able to help them in part of their day means that we need to learn how the other part, how to transfer from technology to human relations, which is the area where they lack ability to interact, how we can transfer from one to another, and I think, again, I'm no specialist, but I think that it probably is going to be using both, right? The human interaction together with technology in certain way, because when they are using technology, they are isolated in their own world. When they are without technology, they are fully integrated to the physical world, and they get too anxious. So there has to be a middle way, right? That you can combine technology with the human interaction, but we are still learning. I don't think we have the answer for that, but it's a process. We'll learn, right? I don't know if you have anything to add here.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you. I think this whole stuff is way too recent. It's very new. We still have learning how to best use all these tools that you have for us right now. It is here for the good, of course. It has the potential of being very misused if you don't pay good attention to it. We are now paying more attention, learning to put some limitations, more censoring, so to say, when children and even adolescents are making use of those technologies. And when it comes to a specific part of the population, those with mentally challenged, then it really has to be with a professional in the field to help us to get to this answer. Because it is something that could be extremely useful. It could it could work on the opposite direction as well. And I think when it comes to mentally deficient individuals, you need to go through a specialist in the field who I'm sure is still trying to figure these things out as much as we are trying to figure this thing in the general population. But I think Paco, as an educator, would have a good input to the discussion.
Okay. All right.
Mhm.
We have more educators here. We have Paco, we have Soraya, we have Dani. All right. Anna.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Quick question. I don't know if you have, sorry, just a minute with the technology here. Okay, so perhaps two questions in one. Autism, once transition to the spiritual world, is it the same theory? Let's say it will take a while and then eventually the spirit will get caught up with its capacities. And then the other question is about people in coma when they discarnate. How, well, two, I guess. One, it might not have anything to do with this particular part of the book, but how is it for them, but more specifically, how is it for them once they transition, once they discarnate? How is it there? Any information around there? Thank you.
In the first case, autism, right? And there are several degrees of autism, right? Or today they talk about level 1, 2, 3, and I don't know how many. So autists that live a normal life, in terms of in the parameters of normality, that function by themselves, have regular works, pay their bills, and can live with others. The discarnation process and returning to the spiritual world is more or less the same as all of us, right? And autists that have mental impairment that prevents them from having a regular life is the type of what we were discussing here, mental impairment, right? That when they return to the spiritual world, it will take some time for them to readjust and to reconnect with their understanding of the spiritual world. In terms of a coma, right? A patient in a coma, many times, depending on the type of spiritual evolution it has, sometimes the spirit may be already living half there and half here. So the transition can be much smoother than someone that died on an accident, a sudden death, right? Like when someone goes through a prolonged disease, they say it's easier to readjust and awake back in the spiritual world than for someone that died suddenly. So coma, in my opinion, favors the readjustment of the spirit to the spiritual world because it's already half there, right? But I don't know, Elmo, that works in the field.
The question, this is a good question because it's the comatose patient, well, I guess, in touch with reality. I don't know. Elmo, you probably, I don't know.
Elmo, you take that.
Yeah, I think with the issue of coma, it really depend on a few things. In the moral qualities of that individual, that spirit, in the understanding of our spiritual nature, in a matter of merit. So someone have is a good citizen, has a no, was someone who practiced charity and halfway at least, was a decent person, but does not understand anything about our spirituality, still in a state of coma, may, through merit, be assisted, be prepared, having been humbled, will receive the information about situations and what's going to happen soon and will be easier. Someone who is more ignorant, who refuses to accept a purely materialistic, who believes there is nothing's after the end of the physical body,
Right.
will struggle a lot more. So the issue of common is the probabilities and possibilities are many, are many. But in general, an individual who was a halfway a good citizen, did not know walk around kicking the dogs and things like that, will be assisted during the period of coma. Will partially leave that physical body and go spend some time in the spiritual world. And when the transition really comes, when there is a complete separation of the physical body and the spirit, the transition will be much easier. But again, there is all those possibilities. What if it's an absolute materialist? How do you deal with it? Right? What is someone who was not a really good citizen and has tremendous amount of debts, and some of those debts could be relieved by spending some more time attached to that body. So the possibilities are many. But I think in general, as João said, an individual in coma will have the opportunity to be more there than here. And when the transition is completed, should have an easier time, should have a lesser period of perturbation in general.
Okay. Right?
Thank you.
So now we're moving to infancy. Let's talk about children.
Wow. Wow. That's a
379.
Yeah.
Is the spirit living in the body of a child as developed as that of an adult? Possibly even more so, if, if it had progressed further before reincarnation. The imperfection of its organs is what prevents the spirit from manifesting itself. It acts according to the method available to express itself.
Okay, so the first thing we have to remember, we are all eternal spirits, right?
yeah.
We are always progressing. So a new generation of reincarnating spirits theoretically are more advanced than the previous generation of reincarnating spirits. That's the law of progress. So it is likely that the spirit incarnating in a child to a couple is more advanced than the couple. Doesn't happen always. Of course, there are numerous cases, but it can be a much more developed spirit than the parents. Now, the physical body of a child will prevent the spirit to fully manifest itself. We see some children manifesting what we call precocious intelligence, right? So intelligence, signs of intelligence that are above their age, but there are restrictions that the physical body imposes, and this is part of the natural law as a necessity for the education of that spirit that is reincarnating, that has the opportunity during especially the first 7 years when it's more malleable to the influences, the external influences, to be educated and to learn to control their inferior tendencies. But the expression is, of course, of the spirit, how it expresses itself is limited by the physical body that has that has the restrictions of a child. We were just studying mental impairment. Childhood is also a physical impairment of some sort, right? That prevents the spirit from fully expressing itself, even if the brain is not fully developed, so it cannot express like the fully developed spirit. Okay?
380?
Ask you just one question. What is more or less the average age in the spirit world of all spirits? If there's such I mean, am I making is it logical, my question?
It's very difficult to say, all right? If you ask how old are we as eternal spirit,
Exactly. In the spirit world, because a child comes as a child, because he has to go through that stage. But in actuality, he has evolved, and he was a mature man or a mature lady. So there must be a standard age in the spirit world. That's standard, for the lack of a better word. I guess I'm using that word.
I think it's first if we consider God's creation, God has created all the time since there's no beginning, no end. So there are spirits from all ages. But if we go to Earth specifically, of course we have to. There are less primitive spirits on Earth, and there are very few perfect spirits, right? Perfect spirits in terms of reaching full evolution. We know only one that incarnated on Earth, Jesus. So I would say that we are all at the age of imperfect spirits, most of us, which is above a primitive spirit, but still not a spirit of a high degree of moral and intellectual involvement. But in terms of number of incarnations or years, there's no number that we can put it. It will be a complete guess that has no it's impossible to give a number there.
Okay.
Because you can have, the degrees of evolution of the spirits are different also. Elmo, go ahead.
But don't we have, like, the fact that we are here on this dimension, planet Earth, isn't that part of that we are more or less within the same range of evolvement?
But not in. But it may have taken me 1,000,000 incarnations to get here, and it may have taken you 100,000 incarnations to get here. So we are at the same level of evolution at a very different speed of evolution.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the problem is that we are conditioned to measure ourselves in this chronological age that
Very
we
good.
understand ourselves, right? But
Yeah,
I
very
think in the spiritual world, that what we see as a chronological age stage in the spiritual world would be more associated with more intellectual values. That would be the equivalent of what we are discussing here as in chronological age. So as Ron said, the spirit may be 2 million years old, but it still behave like a child because it had not used its opportunities to make necessary progress. It's progressing very slowly. And another one, perhaps created the same time, has made better use of all the opportunities, and it's light years ahead of others. So putting a chronological age, I think in spiritual world would be, as Ron said, pretty much impossible.
It is hampering the picture. You're correct. I agree. It is hampering the picture, the view of what it's all about. Yes.
Yeah, and again, right? Time is a concept that we created, it's a concept that we use for Earth and the surroundings of Earth. But we know by science already have shown us if we travel at the speed of light and then come back, we are going to come at a completely different time of the time that we are, of those that are here on Earth, right? It changes as we spend time, in time travel, for instance. That how is time travel possible is in the science fiction way of understanding time, and we understand time. Concept of time is applicable, as we understand, applies to our reality as we live today, but doesn't apply to the whole creation in a sense. Okay.
380?
Yeah, I'm almost thinking of leaving this for next week because we have 5 minutes left. We study one question of infancy, so let's leave infancy for next week so we can start and dedicate the whole class to the study of children, right? So if anyone has any additional comments or questions here. Okay, so we're going to stop here. So this Saturday we are back to the United States Spiritist Federation talks. We are going to have Yuri Castro from Florida, from Miami, that is going to talk about the sower. The parable of the sower taught by Jesus is yet another one of those teachings that require deeper thinking to be understood. What are these rich components of the soil? We'll talk about the soil and how Spiritism can add to the practical aspects of this famous parable, bringing responsibility and numerous blessings along with the knowledge. Okay, so this is Saturday, 11 a.m. through the United States Spiritist Federation YouTube page and the International Spiritist Council YouTube page. This Sunday also we are starting a new book. It's the second Sunday of the month where we used to do the gospel, and we are starting Jesus in the Home, which is a book by Francisco Xavier through the Spirit Neo Lucio.
Neo Lucio, yes.
Yes, Neo Lucio, who is the pseudonym of a companion of Francisco Xavier in the beginning of his mediumship meetings. What was his name, Elmo? Forgot his name.
Arthur
Joviano.
Arthur Joviano.
So Chico Xavier, when he was receiving these books in the beginning, he used to work in a farm in Brazil called Fazenda Modelo, model farm, and belonged to the Joviano family. And his boss was, I believe, the son of this Arthur Joviano, or
Rómulo Joviano, yes.
Rómulo Joviano, yes. He was son, right?
Yes.
So the father dictated this book, Jesus in the Home, that talks about the life in the time of Jesus. Correct, Elmo?
It's basically what we have to do, the Jesus in the Home, that Jesus would gather with the disciples and give some moral teachings at the free time that they have together.
It's a very interesting book, worth watching. Book club next week. Still, we're doing Paul and Stephen, chapter 8 of part 2. This is on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Okay. So, Carol, can you do our final prayer?
Yes, certainly. Thank you very much, John and Elmo, and thank you, Philip, for reading for us this evening. Infinite Creator and Supreme Intelligence, we give thanks to be together again for our studies of the Spirit's book, Book 2, Chapter 7, Mental Impairment and Insanity. The spirit is not impaired, but a body may not be able to fully express abilities due to physical limitations and or moral imperfections. Restrictions can help the spirit to learn and evolve. Insanity may sometimes lead to suicide. A particular spirit may need to free itself from physical life, which takes time in the spirit world and would be an appropriate length of time related to its suffering in the body. We are eternal spirits progressing each generation. A child is still developing and may have physical restrictions such as brain development during youth. However, a child may be spiritually advanced more so than the parents. We give thanks to the spiritual benefactors and the good spirits for guiding and inspiring us this evening. May we receive the love, light, and peace of Christ within us for our loved ones, our teachers, our directors, our counselors, our mediums, the workers, and all participants. We pray for inner peace and especially now for world peace and for those who are suffering in the physical and spiritual worlds. We pray for our center, SGNY, and all spiritual centers throughout the world that they may grow, prosper, progress, expand, and be protected throughout the day and throughout the night. As we close, we humbly ask for safety and protection as we return to our family, friends, loved ones, and co-workers. May we go forth and remind ourselves to be beacons of love, of light, of peace, of service, and charity, which is love in action. May peace and love prevail, and have a blessed new year. So be it.